Hello, everybody out there in podcast listening land. My name is Geoff Arbuckle. This is Film Seizure. And this month, we are going to do basically some guilty pleasure type of flicks. We picked ourselves each one of the regular hosts picked one. And then we kind of have one that we fight about at the end of the month. It's real fun. Real fun. Anyway, with me as always, Chuck Moore. Chuck, say hi to everybody.
Whatever.
Okay, there you go.
I mean, hi.
And also we have Jason Oliver. Jason.
Hey, how you doing? I was just thinking, man, I've been letting all my hair on the top of my head grow during the last year, and Chuck has let all the hair on the bottom of his head grow during the last year. If you guys could only see us, this is hilarious.
I don't have any hair to grow on my head. So.
You could do a hair transplant, though, and you have a full head of hair on your chin. It's awesome.
It's kind of like that. It's like, what was that? The magnetic thing with the little pin and the...
Yeah.
Just
like kind of like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also with us for these first 2 weeks of our Guilty Pleasure Month, we are bringing back Mr. Joe Berryhill. Joe, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you were looking for more punishment for some of the what are you pointing at?
Joe needs to put his microphone down.
No, he's going through the
No?
He's going through computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. It sounded weird. I was just saying.
You missed that part earlier. So anyway, so Joe, he's had an interesting track record with us by suggesting movies that some of us like more than others. And by some of us, I mean me and Days of Thunder, and the rest of you not at all, which is fine. Because I
don't even think Joe liked the movie he suggested, which is hilarious.
I know. But what was funny, I don't know if you noticed, but back in February, when the rain delay was going on for the Daytona 500, they played a documentary about Days of Thunder.
I watched that, actually.
Yeah. But anyway, so Joe was like, hey, why don't you bring me on and kind of, sock it to me, basically. And we were like, well, how about instead we do something pleasant and we talk about some guilty pleasure movies instead? And he's like, yeah, sure. That's cool. I'll do that.
I was like, I'll do that. I'm tired of building up the bank of bad that will be unleashed upon me. So I'm like, you guys can choose it this time.
Well, it should be noted that we gave him the choice of all four of this month's movies, and this week and next week are the ones he chose. So he deliberately chose not to participate in Last Action Hero or Dick Tracy, which we do at the end of the month.
Which is funny because it's like, I think probably generally speaking, those are probably the most divisive movies when it comes to like the public. Whereas like these movies are either you like them or you don't. Or as in the case with this week's episode, which we will get to here momentarily, it's mostly forgotten, I would say, or largely forgotten.
There are elements of it, which of course we'll get into, that I think people remember, but they don't even necessarily remember where it's from.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So this week was my selection for this, and this is something that I've been for, gosh, Jason, probably since the beginning. I was like, man, I want to talk about this movie. And that is the Mike Myers vehicle, which it absolutely is. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is 100% a Mike Myers vehicle, as it turned out. So I Married an Axe Murderer from 1993. And in a couple of weeks, you're going to hear Jason talk about how Last Action Hero made him feel like he was 14 all over again. This movie made me feel like I was 16 all over again. And I unabashedly love everything about this movie. I know it's not that great. I know it's very much of its time. I know it is being very much of its time, and also it being kind of one of those movies that I think spawned a lot of these other Saturday Night Live alumni mug fests, I would call them. where it's just, here's the Saturday Night Live person, let them mug at the camera for 90 minutes. This one I still think is the best, outside of, like, obviously Wayne's World is that's a whole other level.
You think this is better than Blues Brothers?
I don't actually have that much nostalgia for Blues Brothers. It's okay, but I don't that's not a movie that I love necessarily.
What I think is unique,
but I am also, I will, let me clarify something also. Blues Brothers and Wayne's World I think are different, because these are actually carrying out characters from Saturday Night Live. What I'm talking about is, like, nowadays you have a Will Ferrell comedy that I don't think has a script ever, and he just mugs at the camera for 90 minutes. That's the type of movie I'm talking about, like this one.
Yeah, I was going to say that this to me feels like one of the more early versions of like a Saturday Night Live cast member who became very popular, who got to do something that wasn't already tied to an SNL property.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he made it right in between Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. To me, it kind of feels like it was a bit more of a passion project probably for him as well.
Actually, it isn't. There's a whole backstory to this.
What's that Salami guy too? I know
Thomas Salami.
Yeah,
Walk and
Thomas
Talk
Salami.
Man. Walk and Talk guy who worked with
the Aaron Sorkin guy.
Aaron Sorkin's guy. Yeah, this movie actually began several years before as a Woody Allen movie, Woody Allen acted movie. Then it passed through a few other people, and it eventually landed on Mike Myers because Wayne's.
I guess when I think about passion, I think about, clearly all the Scottish stuff is him.
After it got to him, he asked for things to be a little bit like some dramatic stuff where you could actually not just be telling a joke, but also all of the Scottish stuff was like, hey, these are just little bits that we can throw in to punch up the comedic element. And I think that's maybe where a lot of people kind of criticize this movie, is that it never lands on whether or not it wants to be a bunch of jokey jokes or if it wants to be a dark comedy. And I think that's where it's like, it's either going to be a dark rom-com or a jokey joke movie, and then it tried to be both. And I think
I think the reason for that is Mike Myers himself.
Probably.
The way he plays his character, not the way he plays his father, etc. Just Mike Myers' character.
Yes. Charlie. So, I mean, and we'll talk a little bit more later about, like, 1993 was well, and I'm assuming it probably was for Chuck too. 1993 was a very specific year in my coming of age story, because that was, I had a license that summer. And when I used to walk to the movie theater, now I could drive to the movie theater at night or during the day, or, I was basically kind of untethered at that point. And this was one of those summers in which I saw a lot of movies, and a lot of different types of movies. Not only was I seeing things like Last Action Hero, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks or in a few weeks, but I was seeing things like Jurassic Park. I was seeing things like this. The Fugitive came out that summer. It was a pretty wide-ranging summer, and I was going to see as much of it as I possibly could. Chuck, were you here in Indiana in 93?
No, I actually didn't arrive here until 95.
So you weren't working at the Lowe's when this came out?
No, I was not. We were still in high school, man.
Well, I thought you might have been working in, like nights
I was
or
in
something.
junior high.
Yeah, I didn't work much, and I worked at a pizza place and I washed dishes. But I did see this movie in the theater in 1993. And I loved it.
Yes. So, okay, this is where let's real quick. So Chuck and we had talked about this as being one that we were, whenever I brought this up, you were like, yeah, I like that movie a lot too. Does it hold up for you that same way?
Not entirely. I still really like it. I think the thing that I subtly brought up earlier, that I just have a lot of problems with the Mike Myers character itself. Not anything that surrounds him, just him. The way I wish he was more of a straight man and he played more characters outside of him.
So you're thinking,
sense.
yeah, that makes sense, because you're talking like how Eddie Murphy played Coming to America, the original Coming to America, where he's a straight man, but there's the crazy people around him, like when he goes into the barber shop or something like that.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's a great example of it. I don't think that Coming to America is a great movie, but that's the way I would think that this should have played more of.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I think you kind of know exactly what you're in for with Mike Myers in this movie from the very first scene with the giant coffee and him just kind of like almost breaking the third wall, and it's just like, oh, this is a bad joke, and that's a very Mike Myers SNL joke. It's almost like a Wayne joke, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, I want a little less of that throughout this movie, right?
and I do think that later it does settle into that. I think that, and like there are a few times that he doesn't just break the third wall, he also breaks the fourth wall, like when he gets kicked in the nuts. Anyway, I could talk for hours about that rooftop scene. I already told you guys I could go for 3 hours about that rooftop scene. No, I get that. Because I remember that's one of those things, again, it's very much of its time, that type of opening. I will say though that I will be very disappointed if I ever go to San Francisco and it isn't exactly like this movie.
It is a lot like this movie.
Fantastic. I'm going next summer.
Alcatraz is there.
Yeah.
Phil Hartman isn't alive anymore.
Oh, I was going to say, is Vicky there? No, Joe,
I can't wait to talk about that scene.
That was something that was in the trailers. And so like they were like, we gotta harness this Phil Hartman gold here. But Joe, as kind of younger, had you seen this movie like when you were a kid, or?
This was the first time I actually sat down and watched the entire movie front to back. I've seen parts here and there growing up on TV. Honestly, the previews made it look very stupid when I was a kid. I was in middle school when it came out, so I'm not exactly the target audience, especially like you guys were saying. Is it the wacky comedy or is it like the dark rom-com kind of thing? It really didn't appeal to me, so I had never seen it all the way through.
I didn't see it when it came out either, Joe. I think I was in 8th grade. Like, I was definitely more into Last Action Hero than I was So I Married an Axe Murderer in 1990, Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't until a couple years later that I saw it. I think I watched it on VHS or something, and I thought it was funny. I was definitely like, my butt was in the seat for Wayne's World the year before, though.
Oh yeah,
sure.
The movie was on my radar, but I agree with you, Joe. When it kind of hit the previews and everything, it just didn't look like something I would like.
Way more offbeat than something like a Wayne's World or whatever.
Yes, and I think also there is that rom-com element to it also, that like Chuck and I had said that when like some movies came out like Last Action Hero, and you'll hear more about this here in a few weeks, but we felt we were a little too old at the time, and probably it either didn't appeal to us the right way, or we were expecting something else from it, whereas you guys may have been a little bit too young to like, whereas Chuck and I were probably a little bit more of the right age, up through the mid-20s or something, for a comedy that had a more romantic heart to it. And I think that probably tracks. I would say most people younger probably, and it doesn't even have to be that much younger. I mean, you guys are only a few years younger than us, so
that mattered in your teens, and
right.
A lot less now than it did.
Had I seen it though, I probably would have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I definitely would have. I mean, the rooftop scene alone, yeah. Everything with Anthony LaPaglia and Alan Arkin would have hit for me at 14 for sure. Yeah, so I would have come away probably quite liking it, but yeah, it was like with Joe, it just didn't seem like my thing at the time.
I think also this movie I think Mike Myers was really, really, really the big reason why I really like this movie. Just spoke to me immediately. Mike Myers was always my favorite Saturday Night Live person. And this was my favorite period of Saturday Night Live. In fact, actually once, like, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman and Kevin Nealon, and then a little bit later than that, you had Chris Farley and Adam Sandler and David Spade. When they all left, I didn't really watch Saturday Night. I haven't watched Saturday Night Live regularly since then.
That's interesting. I had an internal struggle because I am and was a huge Dana Carvey fan. And Mike Myers was stealing sketch time for Dana Carvey, like in the late 80s, early 90s. And it kind of, I don't know, it struck a nerve with me. So it took me a while to come around to Mike Myers and be like, okay, this guy deserves it. You know, I wanted the church lady more. I wanted, all that stuff more.
Well, I always liked Garth more than Wayne. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And that's, and a lot of that was that Wayne was kind of the quote unquote straight man of the dude.
Right. Exactly.
But this also hit during a time where it's like, okay, you got the two Wayne's World movies, the three Austin Powers movies, this movie. I was on board for every single one of those because of Mike Myers, even to the point where I actually have a tiny bit of appreciation for The Love Guru.
I haven't seen it.
It is really bad.
I will honestly say, though, I don't think I truly became like a Mike Myers fan until Austin Powers. Those movies won me over. They're impossible to dislike.
Yeah, especially the first two.
Yeah, agreed.
But I mean, because Goldmember is clearly not as strong as the other two, but still,
it makes me laugh more than the other two in some scenes. Some of the Goldmember scenes are like the best of the series, but the entire movies of 1 and 2 are better films.
Yeah, the original, watching it now, it was a pretty slow movie compared to the others, especially 2 and 3. Like, those are like high octane. They're going. They're a joke a minute kind of thing. Watching the first one again, it's like, man, this took a while to get going. When it does, it's great.
The first one's like 70s James Bonds, and then the next two are like late 80s James Bond type rips.
Yeah, it's I think definitely also the first one was like really wanting to establish like here are all of those James Bond tropes and so on.
Not only that, but and of course this is an episode all about Austin Powers, but at the same time it's like you get all those first reveals of all these characters too. Right. So that plays a lot better the first time through than it does again, right? But by the time you get to the sequels, you just want to get right to those characters.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So all right. So this movie, so this is about a guy named Charlie McKenzie, who is Mike Myers, who is he is scared of commitment. Which that was a very 90s thing.
It was.
It was. I mean, like, because nowadays it's like you don't really see that in these types of comedies anymore, where you have the person who's essentially running
20 something. Yeah.
Right. Who's afraid of being, tied down to anything or whatever.
Like the quarter life crisis was strong with the like older Gen X. Yeah.
Yep. And it was also the the fear of missing out on the next hot babe or whatever. It's like that is very much a 90s thing that helped. Like guys in the 80s were just like sleeping around with all the hot babes in movies, right? It's like in the 90s you had to temper that a little bit, and so you made them afraid of the commitment and stuff like that. But then, so he's got a friend who is an undercover cop, which is Anthony LaPaglia.
God,
And
when he gets to do comedy, and it's rare, but when Anthony LaPaglia gets to do comedy, he's always funny. I love him.
the whole you first see him. They're at this coffee house, and Charlie is a poet. Although I'm not entirely sure if that is actually his paying job.
Right.
But it doesn't matter.
How does this guy make money?
It doesn't matter. He's got health insurance. It's good. It's all fine. He does end up actually working at the butcher shop, at least.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, he is. So when you first see him, it's like Anthony LaPaglia is dressed up like a pimp, like a straight up 70s pimp, which.
He's Huggy Bear.
He's just like Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch.
We find out he actually really loves Starsky and Hutch.
He does.
Yes, he does.
So he is, and he admits that he is an undercover cop trying to look cool, not having any idea what cool is. And
especially at a coffee shop.
With a bunch of beatniks, essentially.
Right.
Well, they're on Kerouac Road. I found that interesting.
Yeah.
Totally playing.
Which is funny
into that.
because he's almost so off kilter that he fits in this place, though.
And the place is called Rhodes. I don't know if you guys noticed that too. Anyway, so he this is where we find out it's like, Charlie is allergic to commitment, and like he always finds an excuse to break up with the girl that he's dating. In fact, for example, Pam smelled like soup. That was the reason why he broke up with her, even though there was nothing wrong with her. So we also shortly after find out that there is going to be dinner at Charlie's parents' place, to which Charlie has to go pick up a haggis. Now, this was the first time I had ever heard of a haggis. And even though there are strong Scottish ties to my family's history, I could have gone a lifetime without knowing what haggis was. To which even later Charlie says most of Scottish food is based on a dare, and I kind of believe that.
Yeah.
I actually like haggis. I'm gonna just throw that out there.
When have you?
I had no idea what it was when I first get it. You can't actually get real haggis in the United States because I believe lamb's lung is an ingredient, and for whatever reason, the FDA prohibits the sale of lamb's lung.
It's probably all the smoking that lambs do. You get sick.
But honestly, Geoff, you're someone who likes gizzards and weird shit like that, so. I think you would actually like haggis. It's essentially just a sausage, but made up of like sheep's liver, heart, and oatmeal, and like.
I probably would. I think it's the presentation of it being stuffed into the intestine.
Yeah, well, it's just like a sausage.
I know, but
you can also get it. Usually it's served like almost like just as kind of ground.
Yeah,
sort of meat. Yeah.
That's if I ever get the chance to go to my work's office in Scotland, I'll say, okay, I'll go, but you better have a haggis ready for me.
You should try it. I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I mean, so he goes to this butcher shop, and there he meets Harriet, who is played by Nancy Travis, who I had a huge crush on. In fact, I think the fact that I like curly hair on women probably goes back to Nancy Travis of the early 90s. So he goes over to his parents' house, and this is where we get to meet Charlie's father, who is also played by Mike Myers, and his little brother, Heed.
Heed! Ow!
Heed, I think, was one of the kids in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I'm almost positive.
I don't know if he is in that, but he is in almost every Mighty Ducks movie.
Oh, that makes sense.
He was one of the Mighty Ducks.
And as far as Nancy Travis is concerned, of course, probably the first thing I saw her in was 3 Men and a Baby. She was in that. But the thing I remember her from is Greedy,
Greed,
which came
yeah.
out the year after this. Yeah,
I
that's a movie.
made sure to watch that movie because of her, actually. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the movie's great. Of course, Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, and you also have Kirk Douglas in there too.
Yes.
So yeah, Chuck, you want to talk a little bit about Charlie's family?
Yeah, so Charlie's dad is like, I don't even know what to say about this man. He's a lunatic.
He's got a Scottish Wall of Fame.
Yeah, he's got a Scottish Wall of Fame. He basically yells everything. Short of saying if it ain't Scottish, it's crap. He's basically that character from SNL. And he's just constantly yelling at Heed, who I wonder, is his name actually Heed or is it Head? It sounds like he's talking.
It is.
Calls him Head because his head is huge.
Right.
Yeah.
But he
They
says
say
Heed.
his
But
when
it pronounces it Heed. Yeah.
when Charlie walks in, he says his name. I think it's William. He's like,
William.
"Oh, hi, William."
Hi, William. Hey, Charlie.
So
Yeah.
it's
and
it's
then you never hear that name ever again.
nope. It's just his giant head, and he's Heed.
Yep. Yeah, and he's a man's man too. Like he calls Charlie a pansy basically, and says,
For
"Oh
wanting
yeah,
to
go
visit with his
talk
mom."
to your mother,
Yeah.
you friggin'
Float
pansy."
away, you wee fairy.
Yeah.
So it's so weird. I forgot that Michael Myers played his dad in this, right?
How could you? This is the most.
I don't know. I don't know why, but I forgot. And I mean, I was kind of kicking myself for that later because it's obvious, right? Especially with the bagpipe scene, which is one of the
Oh
things
my
I
god!
most. But I swear to God, when I first saw him, I thought it was Phil Hartman, and then I was like, "Holy shit, that looks like if Phil Hartman and Al Franken were like playing Mike Myers playing a Scottish version of them." It was like this weird mix of all these SNL characters. It was bizarre, but he's hysterical. Like this movie would suffer greatly without Stewart.
Absolutely. I mean, that character is the beginning of Mike Myers playing great characters in other, like it's the first one.
It's the proto, also kind of like the proto fat bastard a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. It feels like he's testing characters in this movie. Definitely, that became fat bastard. There was a lot of, which I didn't realize that this came after Wayne's World, but him as himself, as Charlie, felt like a lot of the Wayne kind of jokes and pranks, kind of crap that was going on in Wayne's World. I'm like, is he just trying out for future movies here? Like what's going on here?
Yeah, it's like Charlie is a grown-up Wayne, if that makes sense. You know, like because he's still making
Shaw. It makes sense.
Well, because there are some things later that you can directly like when he meets Ralph and then his towel falls off and he has that face that's a very Wayne face, and then he asks if he's naked. That's
a gag that works in Austin Powers that doesn't work in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was probably something that just kind of came up in the day. I think what makes it funny for me though is that she grabs his ass.
I just think it goes on a little too long, and they really overdo it with the awkwardness.
Well, and I think that and this is a movie that it is
the timing's off.
It's a prototype to what became awkward humor, I think. This was kind of the beginning of, hey, this is something that Gen X likes, is this very awkward, kind of uncomfortable humor at times. But I don't think it had really fully formed at the time that this movie came out. I think this was really where we kind of see a lot of it for the first time.
What I do like about the Ralph scene though is how deliberately placed it is to throw the audience off. Yeah. And how absolutely dumb it is, because when you think about it later, it's like, what? She has a friend named Ralph, right?
So yeah, so that
it actually plays funnier. Like like in multiple viewings, I think,
Right.
because of how dumb it is.
Right. So at the parents' house, and while Charlie's dad and Anthony LaPaglia are watching soccer, and this is where you get a lot of the, like they want to see a replay of a goal, and that's when Heed sits up and they can't see the TV, and that's just yelling at Heed. And then when he says something to him about taking the paper to him, if he can lift his own head to take the paper to them, and then he's like, "Oh, I may have overdone it on that one." He's going to cry himself to sleep on his huge pillow. And what makes that scene so much funnier is that I honestly believe Anthony LaPaglia is like losing his shit, like he can't keep it together, and that like a Saturday Night Live skit.
Yeah,
right.
But we find out that Charlie's mom gets all of her news from the Weekly World News, which seems so quaint these days. That's where these conspiracy theories started. And she's talking about like how there is Mrs. X, who is a black widow, essentially, who's gone around the country and killed her new husband. There was
basically right after the honeymoon, they disappeared.
They disappear, and they find, and they're the first guy was an Atlantic City lounge singer. The second guy was a Russian martial arts expert. And the third guy was a plumber named Ralph Elliott. And so after he starts dating Harriet, he doesn't realize that little things start to kind of show up. She can speak Russian, as she kind of gets catcalled by Russian sailors in San Francisco. And she basically tells them off in Russian. When they go back to her place, she's got a gigantic poster of Atlantic City, which she said she used to live in. She has a martial arts like display on her wall, which is like a uniform and like fucking weapons.
Yeah.
And then after they spend the night together, he's woken up by her screaming the name Ralph in bed, to which she said, he's like, "So who's Ralph?" And she's like, "Oh, she's a friend of mine." To which he's like, "Oh, she's a friend of yours named Ralph. She." But again, it's also kind of plays up to what we know about Charlie. He's trying to find his out. Like you get that impression that all of these things are adding up to him trying to find his out. Which is funny because the next morning, I think there is an excellent comedy cut in this that I don't think it is what I think it is or what I find so funny about it, but it cracks me up every time. The next morning, he sees somebody showering, so he's going to get into the shower thinking it's Harriet. Well, it's Harriet's sister, who's played by Amanda Plummer, who is very scary looking in this movie. She's
scary looking in everything.
She is. She plays crazy-eyed really well. The funniest part of that scene to me is when he contemplates whether he should do it or not, because you can see him thinking.
Yes, right. But then when he opens the door, he's like, "Oh my God, I thought you were somebody else," and then when the cut that I love is it smash cuts to what looks like him going under the bed to hide. He's just trying to find his shoe.
Yeah,
that kills me every time.
Yeah. I thought he was trying to crawl under the bed as well.
I even remember to this day people laughing in the theater thinking that he was going to hide under the bed. Yep. It's just it's an accidental great comedy cut or comedy edit. So then he says something to her sister about how because she's like, "Did she mention me at all?" And he's like, No, but she did mention Ralph. Actually, she screamed Ralph or something like that. And her reaction to that is actually pretty funny too, because it's like an awkward thing that, you know, she knows it happened, you know, like while they were spending the night together or whatever, which is, you know, just one of those little jokes or a little reaction in this movie. But
well, it's also kind of a hint.
Yeah, right. Like, right. And,
you know,
she
what's
knows
really going on.
Right. She knows who Ralph is. She absolutely knows who Ralph is. But at this point, we just think that, oh, you know, it's whatever, you know, but yes, in retrospect, you get that hint.
I mean, they deliberately titled this movie "So I Married an Axe Murderer," sure. So you have a certain preconception the entire time, you know.
Right.
Like, you know what's going on, but do you really?
Right.
Is the whole thing.
So then, this is about the time that that Charlie and Tony. It's really important that Anthony LaPaglia is a Italian police officer. We'll get to those beats here in just a moment.
Oh,
God. But they decide to go visit Alcatraz because that's what you do in San Francisco.
Yeah, apparently. Let's spend a Saturday going to Alcatraz. Two guys who live in San Francisco and have their entire lives.
This is where they go to go talk.
They've gone multiple times.
Yes, because Vicky is great. Quote unquote.
Yeah, I know Vicky. He's their favorite tour guide at Alcatraz.
I can only imagine. I wonder if that actually played as funny for people from San Francisco, or if they rolled their eyes.
Well,
at that, you know?
What I find kind of funny, because like growing up, I didn't know any. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, as a 16-year-old dumb kid. You know, it's like, yeah, that's where you go. You know, it's like you go and hang out at the place. Like, if you live in New York, don't you go to the Statue of Liberty sometimes? I mean, wouldn't that be where I would go to talk with my best bud about my new girlfriend? I do imagine that
most people in San Francisco probably do eventually go to Alcatraz at some point, just because their kids make them go. Right?
Probably.
Like,
yeah, or you have somebody visiting. Let's go to Alcatraz. It's
right.
Like, yeah, we're gonna do the touristy thing.
Absolutely.
But if you live there and have your entire life,
yeah, two guys in their late 20s who've been friends forever don't just go to Alcatraz like on a Saturday.
I'm telling you, that's where they go and talk about chicks, man.
They certainly do that. Yes, they do.
I mean, Vicky is worth admission, though. Like, if you're going to go on a Vicky tour, you line it up. That's why you're on a Saturday. It's like, working. Let's do this.
Yeah, so this is Phil Hartman. His one scene. There's a lot of people who have one scene in this movie, and it's fantastic because they do show up in Ned's Atomic Dustbin's video for Saturday night. Yeah.
Oh God, they made a video for that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's all Scottish themed.
Oh God,
because of course.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
It's Scottish and San Francisco themed. So like, Kramer, Michael Richards is dressed up like a beatnik in the video, and anyway. So they go there. They're talking about how great Harriet is, and Vicky. So Vicky is one of the tour guides. His name is John Johnson, but everyone here calls him Vicky, and he's got a story about which gangster is it that.
Al Capone.
It wasn't Capone, was it? Like, I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure it's Al Capone, but maybe I'm wrong.
Machine Gun Kelly, I think, is who it was.
Oh yeah, it's Kelly. You're right.
Yeah. He says, he had what we call in the prison business a bitch, and so. And he's going into like the gritty details of how he basically cut the eyeballs out of his bitch and then pissed in the ocular cavities, at which point Charlie interrupts to talk more about Harriet. to which Tony's like, shut up. Because you do not interrupt a Vicky story.
I know. I love it too. How he's like, and now I'm going to tell you something that you won't hear from the other tour guides.
That's why you go. This is why you go.
It's perfect. Phil Hartman deadpan too.
Oh God, so Phil Hartman was another one of those. I mean, that's my era of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
you know.
Treasure.
If Phil Hartman lived, it's a tragedy that he didn't, he would be my absolute 100% pick to pick up the Naked Gun mantle.
Oh God, yes.
Once Leslie Nielsen was gone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Little aside there.
Sorry. That's
just thinking about that though makes me warm and fuzzy and a little bit poignant and sad. Yep.
Yeah. So things start to get a little sideways for Charlie and Harriet. They go to dinner at his parents', to which she gets surprised by Charlie's dad, and she pulls a kung fu move on him.
And he likes it.
He likes it.
I like this one. Don't let her go.
After he comes down the stairs with his pants off.
Yeah. Heed pants.
No. So, but then Charlie hears about how Harriet had lived in these other places, and he sees that Weekly World News story about Mrs. X on the toilet, because that's where you read the Weekly World News. By the way, 100% you read that shit on the crapper.
Shit in, shit out, buddy.
Yep, that's right. It'll help you go. But
absolutely,
they and so now he starts. Now that paranoia starts to creep in, she makes him a health shake for him to drink, to which he thinks he's going to try to poison him. So he backs away from her, thinking he's left the room. He's just in a closet, and everything falls on it. That's one joke I do like. I do like that one, because it's also the closet door is see-through.
That is a weird closet, right?
Like every closet.
Right, yep. Right. But then she's, he apologizes because he realizes his paranoia is getting the best of him. But then she freaks him out again because she starts talking about how it's like, have you ever thought about like when you're standing at the edge of a cliff with someone and, if you could just push them, it's like it's like it starts to get a little
or I could do anything too when you're sleepy. One thing we do need, or when you're sleeping, like we trust, I'm just talking about trust, but one thing to note here is that Charlie had told Anthony LaPaglia earlier that he has to talk him out of finding the little excuse this time.
Right.
So when these things start to mount up, LaPaglia obviously is supposed to be like, no, asshole. That's important for the rest of the movie.
But he actually
two words. Therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually ends up making it worse.
And we also skipped over, I think we skipped over the scene. What is LaPaglia's character name? I'm sorry.
Tony.
I left Tony
Giardino.
Tony, when he's in the police station with
Yes.
Alan Arkin.
Yeah, let's go ahead and back that up to because Alan Arkin is so fucking good in this.
He's like this scene where he's talking, and this has come up on quite a few episodes lately, and maybe here in the future, not to let the cat out of the bag, about the cop, that just screams all the time, or the sergeant that just screams, or the chief,
hard ass,
whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
And LaPaglia had watched Starsky and Hutch. He's, his
he
whole
wanted
idea,
to be Serpico.
Yes. All his ideas about the police force come from film.
Yeah.
And he's got this really nice captain played by Alan Arkin.
God,
and he's like, can you just once yell at me? The
scene where because he's sitting there and he's clearly bummed out, and he's like, "Oh, Tony, what's going on?" And he sits down like a dad. It's like, "What's bothering you, sport?" Basically. Oh my God.
Talks him out of his existential crisis, and his existential crisis is about the fact that he's not enjoying being a cop because it's all filling out forms,
Right.
and then he starts complaining about Alan Arkin being too nice. And then Alan Arkin at the end of it says, "Oh, somebody needs a hug."
Yep. It's so great. It's like it's my favorite scene in the whole movie.
It's wonderful.
Combined with the next time they're on screen together.
Those two, every scene those two are in together is gold. It's absolutely gold.
Yep. So back to her putting him in whatever, a nervous state because she's saying weird shit.
Right. And then so he decides that he is going to he finds out that the lounge singer from Atlantic City, his body has turned up. So now he's really starting to put those pieces together, and he decides to break up with her. To which then that's the next time we see Alan Arkin together. So Alan Arkin's character is it's just Tony's captain. So Tony's captain comes busting into the room and he starts yelling at him about how it's like, "I heard you're sticking your nose in the
to other people's cases."
Right.
This is like a testament to Alan Arkin's greatness, because I actually was fooled into thinking he was mad.
Same here. I was like,
didn't
what's
even-
going on?
Yeah, it didn't even register with me that he was playing the part for Tony.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even
completely got me.
Yeah.
Like I was gotten.
Yeah.
Because then he was like, he's like, "Well, what's that all about?" And he's like, "Well, I want to know the news." "Oh, you want to know the news? Well, it turns out that somebody had confessed to the crime." It's like, "We've got him." And it's like he's giving him everything he needs to know, but he's yelling it at him like he's angry.
The line from Arkin 2, was it too much? Was the racial slur too much, or?
Well, yeah, it's paisan, not paisan.
Yeah. And he's like, "Paisan, paisan, hey, paisan," and he's like practicing for the next time.
That's so great. That was one of the moments that, like, I was legitimately like, okay, that's awesome. Like, some more of that in this movie.
Yep.
They 100% should have made a cop movie with Tony.
Oh my God.
Like completely separate from like an offshoot. But
it's such a good concept, like such a great bit.
I also would have watched a feature-length movie with LaPaglia and Charles Grodin. 100%.
Oh, yes, again.
Yeah. So he's because this is, by this point in the movie, we do kind of shift away from the as I call it, the Mike Myers mugging sort of thing. We kind of now, this is where it really kind of becomes more of a rom-com, because he goes back to get Harriet back, and he fails initially, but then he does his poetry for her, and apparently that works.
It's so bad. The poetry in this movie is so bad, and it's pointedly so. I think.
Right, it's pointed. Yeah, it is pointed.
For me the first time. It works for me the first time. The line, "She stole my heart and my cat." Like, I've been saying that all day today.
Well, but he even like tips his cap to it at this point, because he even says this poem sucks.
This poem sucks.
But that does it. He gets her back. They go to the 30th anniversary for Charlie's parents, which that line, when he's talking about how, like, when Charlie's dad is talking about how it's like 30 years ago we both said I do, we haven't agreed on anything since.
That's a great line.
Yeah. But the even better, funnier line, it's like, "And I still love you because it could have been worse."
Yeah.
And
we haven't given enough credit to Charlie's mom either. She's
Brenda
great
Fricker
in this movie.
Brenda Fricker's from My Left Foot. She's She was an Oscar nominee, I believe.
Yeah, the way she like kisses Tony and
Oh my
all
God,
that, like,
she is all
Her
about
thing
Tony.
for Tony is amazing. She's like smitten by his Italian charms.
which it's even funnier because she's probably known him since he was 9.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah, it makes
he's like
zero
sticking her
sense.
tongue down his throat. It's hilarious. Yeah,
Oh, in the
It's
wedding
jarring.
you
reception,
really grew up. You just really grew up sexy.
in the wedding reception, a little bit later, he's got all of her lipstick on the side
Yeah.
of his face,
Yep.
Just
and he's
come-
still playing
but
a
it-
scene straight too.
Those are the little jokes I appreciate about this movie, and more of why I wish Myers would have played it straight.
What I kind
I'm
of
not
imagine
taking away
it as-
anything from it, but yeah.
No,
What I kind of imagine it as is an overly affectionate mother who was overly affectionate with her son's friends in an appropriate way, but that became like this thing where when he became, an adult, she was like, "You're sexy."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so weird and came out of nowhere. With, like no build up or anything. Is like, this lady's basically raping him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, this is not cool.
I like
Well-
how she has to collect herself after he leaves too.
Yeah,
The,
she's like,
the
"Whoa."
joke keeps going.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and the other little thing that's happening during that, every time Charlie's dad gets pissed drunk, he sings Rod Stewart.
Yep.
If you want my God.
We're not there yet. Hang on a second. There's so at the 30th anniversary, Charlie's like, "Hey, will you marry me?" And she's like, "No," and he's like, "Please." And she's like, "No." It's like you're gonna leave or whatever. And he's like, and he eventually convinces her to they get married. She has a little trepidation at the altar, but she eventually says, "I do." And after they're pronounced as and this is one of those little jokes where she goes in for the big kiss on him afterwards, and of course Myers does the little leg, lifts up his leg.
Her delayed yes, and the reaction of everyone in the church is pretty funny.
Oh yeah, because Stewart, he's like hanging on every moment of it.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, of course, he's like, "Let's get pissed," which I say that a lot. I used to say that a lot too, especially
In church too. Yep.
Oh yeah, fuck. Especially next time somebody gets married and I'm in the crowd, the moment that happens, I'm going to stand. Let's get pissed.
I have
We
said
are
that.
very
Like,
lucky.
let's have a piss up at the bar. I've been known to say that.
I've heard you say
occasionally.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when we get the Piper doing Rod Stewart and Charlie's dad singing "If You Think I'm Sexy," or yeah.
I think that's the thing that I was talking about, that everybody who has seen this movie or even hasn't seen this movie knows about this movie. Is that scene?
Oh,
Do you think that's accurate?
we have a Piper down. Yeah. I think
Or-
so.
For me, it was the look at the size of his head.
Sure. Well, it's all Charlie's.
Yeah.
Is what
Yeah.
most
Yep.
people remember about this. And there's one last thing about Harriet that would have pegged her as Mrs. X that they haven't heard from yet. And that was, the lounge singer was known for singing "Only You" in multiple languages, to which Anthony LaPaglia says, like, does she even know the lyrics to "Only You"? And he's like, gee, I don't know. We haven't gotten to that all-important part in our relationship in which we know whether or not each other knows the lyrics to "Only You." But then she begins singing it in multiple languages, and the reaction to them both turning to her
Yep.
as she's singing
Yep.
it is fucking gold.
It's a great punchline to that joke for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
And then of course she has him come over while she's singing, and of course the whole time he just looks terribly uncomfortable, but he's trying to let it slide. It's like, oh, it might just be a coincidence or whatever. But her mood begins to shift a little bit as they go off to their honeymoon at some beat poet's residence or something. And
what was that place, and who would choose to go there?
Apparently poets.
Apparently a 1990s beat poet, from San Francisco.
Stay for a nightcap.
I guess.
So she is worried. She's worried that Charlie's gonna leave her, or whatever. He is a little weirded out by the fact that she's so quiet. But in the meantime, Tony is working the case. He finds out that from Alan Arkin, who screams it at him again, that the woman who confessed to the murder of the lounge singer, or Ralph Elliott, it was one of those two. It was either the plumber or the lounge singer.
Right.
Had also confessed to the murders of Abraham Lincoln, Warren G. Harding, and it's Julius Caesar.
Yep.
And she's a nutcake. And that's where, like, at this point, Tony's had enough of this act, because now he needs to call Charlie. And it's like, no, shut up. I've had enough. It's like, I've had enough of this dressing down, basically. And so he has to hurry out there to save Charlie and to arrest Harriet.
Right.
Meanwhile, he also calls Charlie and it's like, hey, it all came back. It's Harriet, because he also sent the picture around.
He saw a picture of her. Yeah.
Right, because he
confirmed it was her.
Right. He said the guy in one of the guys who knew one of the victims said, yeah, that's her. Her hair was shorter. The kung fu guy said she gained a lot of weight.
Which is hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where, I don't know how she would have existed.
Did she grow 2 feet? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So he's, he calls Charlie, to which Charlie is now freaked out, but now he's stuck in this odd ritual at this place where people who are celebrating anniversaries and people who are newlyweds have to dance with one another. San Francisco, man. That's all I have to believe that is. But they eventually get escorted back to their room for the honeymoon, to which he offers the bellhop to come in for a nightcap.
The bellhop is clearly like not comfortable with that.
No, and he's like, no, I'm sure you guys want to, have your, alone time. And that's when Charlie screams, stay for a nightcap. And the guy goes, ah, and takes off running.
So this plays really well here, because we know how it ends, right? Kind of. The way she's acting, she doesn't want him out of his sight, right? For a particular reason.
Right.
He sees that as her being murderous.
Right.
Like domineering, controlling. So it plays really well. Like the way he reacts to her when they get in the room.
This is the good dark comedy part of it.
Right.
This comes across more like a... there were a few movies in the late 70s and early 80s that kind of played to this a little bit, like Murder by Death was one of them that kind of was a dark murder comedy. And you see a lot of that. I mean, it's shot pretty well too, because there's a storm that knocks out the power. Oh, by the way, we've skipped over. What's the first mode of transportation that Tony takes to get to?
Oh man,
so great! He charters a prop plane, and it's piloted by Stephen Wright, which is so great. Stephen Wright is always welcome whenever he wants to show up. Yep.
Yeah. And because he even admits that it's like, oh, I've done this many times, flying basically in a storm. I've never done it at night.
my favorite is like, well, how do you even see in all this? Anthony Paglia asks him. He's like, oh, I have instruments, and he says, really? Do you even know what those instruments are? What's that? It's like, it's the artificial horizon, which is even better than the real horizon.
Yeah, that was my favorite line there too.
Well,
of course, the delivery is just spot on. It's just perfect.
Perfect. Yep.
Do you guys
Can't do it
remember?
justice.
There was a time, I think it was in the 80s, Stephen Wright did a stand-up, and I think it was on HBO or something, and he was talking about like memories that he had with his dad, and that his dad would take him to the parade, and it cuts to like this black and white footage of the parade, and you see grown-up Stephen Wright sitting on the shoulders of a little old man watching a parade.
I don't remember that, but that sounds hilarious.
That sounds amazing. I have to see this.
Oh, it's great. I think he even had like a little balloon or something. Anyway, so then when he lands, what's his second mode of transportation to get to the hotel or to the bed and breakfast?
He wants to finally commandeer a car because he's
great.
never gotten to do that.
So great.
Yeah,
And
he said that earlier. I've never even commandeered a vehicle.
But he gets shut down by none other than Charles Grodin.
Mr. Jason
And
Oliver
Does he say,
himself.
I happen to be a lawyer, and I know that you can't do that.
The way he approaches it too, sir, I'm going to have to commandeer this car. It's like, no. Can I please commandeer your car? Just so polite about it.
He eventually talks him into it, though, and he gets to the hotel. And
But Grodin has to drive. He
Grodin
drives.
has to give him a ride.
he has to give him the ride.
He just hit
And
bikes.
the whole time he's like nervously tapping on the dashboard, and he's like, what does he say? Something real sarcastic about that being his favorite thing. Or I think he says something like, is this bothering you? He's like, no, it's my favorite thing. I think that's one of the things that's also really, really memorable about this movie is that you have these kind of obviously cartoonish characters that are interacting with real people. Like, because there's a scene in the 30th anniversary dinner at the Scottish bar where everybody's dressed up like Scotsmen. And, you know, like you've got the little old man who's singing, you know, like happy anniversary to them. And like Stuart's like, shut it. And like the guy is still singing or whatever. And it's like, it's just like this little old guy who has to deal with this screaming maniac Scotsman.
Yep.
But I think that that's one of the things that really works with this is that you have these obviously comedic characters, almost like they're operating in a real world scenario. And that's where like some of the best comedy comes from. Because like that, again, it's like Tony is a cartoon cop and Charles Grodin is a real life person who is just not having it. They're just not having it. But so while Tony is trying to rush his way to the bed and breakfast, Charlie has locked Harriet in the closet to protect himself. But then he finds the note that is meant to be left when he supposedly leaves her. To which then he starts to kind of he's kind of starting to put some things together. He thinks this is really, really weird. And creeping up behind him with an axe is creepy as Amanda Plummer, who plays Rose. And her line about, it's like, you were not supposed to be here when the note was placed. It's like, it's so crazy. So now all the pieces fall together. It's not Harriet. It is actually Rose, who is our hatchet woman. And so to basically escape her, he escapes out onto the roof, where so he's outside. She follows. Anthony LaPaglia shows up, unlocks the closet. Harriet goes running out thinking, oh, we got to go save Charlie. He's out on the roof. He grabs her and handcuffs her. And she's like, no, he's out on the roof. He's in danger. And
you can obviously hear him screaming, but
yes,
he's ignoring it.
There's the scene where he's
on.
trying to be like all like badass, because the first thing he does to calm her down is he shoots into the air, which almost hits Charlie in the nuts, as because he's standing right over it. And later, because Charlie like slips off and is like hanging onto the side of the thing, and Rose is axing down, trying to like cut his hand off, basically. Meanwhile, inside, Tony is lighting a cigarette like a cool ass cop. And he's like, "All right, tell me this one more time." Meanwhile, in the background, we hear thunk, thunk, and she's like, "That's them outside right now." And he's like, "No. Let me take this back for a minute here. Let's start from the beginning." And and all the while, you can hear exactly what's going on. But she eventually convinces him. And Charlie's out on the roof. He thinks he's kind of basically gotten away from, or at least for the moment, has gotten away from Rose. Tony is now down on the street level, basically getting Harriet to safety. And Harriet sneaks up behind him and is going to hatchet him. And he catches the axe, and they struggle over it a little bit, and she kicks him in the balls. And Chuck, what does he do to retaliate?
He kicks her in the vagina, I think.
Yes. And then she just kind of smiles at him, and then he goes,
"Yeah."
Ooh.
That same joke is later played in Beer Fest.
Yes.
Do you remember that movie?
Yep.
Oh my god, it's just as funny in that scene too.
But he eventually knocks her off the roof, which basically Tony has to like catch her from falling and bring her inside and arrest her. And Harriet and Charlie live happily ever after. The end.
The end.
We didn't talk about the other nut shot, did we? On the roof as he's running away from Rose.
Oh yeah, he slides down and
He
hits
falls.
the pipe.
And is there for what feels like 3 minutes of screen time as he's groaning, like while running from Rose.
Well, yeah,
Definitely
because it was when she flung the axe at him, and it like hit right in front of him, and then he let go, and then he hit that little pipe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, really love this movie. I know it has problems. I know it's not for everyone. I know it doesn't necessarily age well because it is. Like I said, it does kind of almost begin a bad trope with Saturday Night Live actors who kind of go on. They get vehicles just to do all of their worst jokes to the camera. Will Ferrell. But I still very much, every time I watch it, I picture myself 16 years old again. I saw it the first time, and then I like went and told my buddy Dan about it. We went the next night and saw it, and I saw it for a second time with him, and it's terribly nostalgic for me.
My only real issue with this movie, and we didn't talk about it much, if at all, was the music. They played "There She Goes" like 3,900 times.
Well,
they just played bad music. It was poor choices. I know they were big hits at the time, but they're not timeless songs even.
Well, I think some of that is just that's the early 90s of it.
All of it is poor choices. If you watch Singles as early 90s, all that music
I was going to say
lives on.
Well, and I was going to say it probably is trying to follow up with something like Singles, even though Singles wasn't that big of a hit either, except for it's not going to play grunge music for this movie. It's going to be a little bit pop.
I mean, it doesn't have to be grunge, but it was just, the music is just bad, most of it. Sorry. That's my thought.
Yeah, the "There She Goes" being the first two songs we hear, like one after the other. Like, really, they're doing this again?
Yeah.
Like, was it an inside joke, or it didn't feel like it? If it was trying to be funny with it, it did not land.
It reminded me of like the old Italian films that only had the rights to one song, and you hear it over and over and over again. And sometimes those are good and like catchy, sometimes they're not. And this one just, I don't know. Well, Big Audio Dynamite was in here. I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, I mean,
can't hear you, Jason. Jason, you're muted, maybe?
Yeah, he is.
I am. Damn. Yeah, I liked the Big Audio Dynamite song. I liked that song a lot, and I liked the way it was used in montage. That worked really well in the butcher shop scene.
Yep.
And I actually, when they play the original Saturday Night with Michael Myers, when they introduce you to Stewart.
Oh yeah, the Bay City Rollers version.
That is really fun, and it gives you the perfect entry point into.
Shut
into
up,
Stewart.
the Bay City Rollers.
Yeah.
But
Game's about to start.
and I actually like the song "There She Goes." All the versions of this song. There's more than like probably a million. But yeah, I do think it's like let's choose something else here.
Well, I think
the theme is this the.
I think it was meant to be. I mean, it is ultimately played because it's also played as an instrumental too, which is really, I think, meant to be the leitmotif for her or their relationship, one or the other. But yeah, I mean, I can understand that. This was a soundtrack that I bought immediately and I listened to a ton when I was 16 because there's a good. I think there's a good. Let me pull it. Where's it at here? Here it is.
I was probably still listening to the top.
I don't think that the soundtrack is terrible. I just think is odd. And it's strangely shoegaze. Like it really leans into some shoegaze, like the Boo Radleys, Suede, even Ed's Atomic Dustbin, who are kind of shoegaze for their day. So it's kind of a strange choice. So it just feels a little all over the place, I guess. And then you got the fucking Spin Doctors. And it's like what is that? Just because the song was popular, or
I don't think the song. I think the song became popular afterwards. I think it was just, hey, sell this because it might have even been.
It was released as a single in 1993, peaked at number 1, peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. So I think it was already popular.
Well, hang on a second here because
weird soundtrack for sure.
Yeah, because like I like the there's like a Toad the Wet Sprocket song on here. There's Soul Asylum, who showed up on soundtracks all over the place, and because the next year they were on the Clerks soundtrack.
Isn't it just Dave Pirner on this one, not Soul Asylum?
It's Soul Asylum.
It is Soul Asylum.
Yeah, because they showed up.
I mean, he's the singer. I just thought it was a solo.
Yeah. No, it was. But yeah, that was like Soul Asylum was always the one where it's like, oh, I like this song in this movie, but I never really bought an album of theirs. It's like I always had soundtracks like this or like Clerks that they were on, and it's like, oh, this is one of the, they
were about as close to the pop sound of what we'll call it grunge. Right? That's just a large term, but that's just as close to the pop versions of that stuff that I liked was Soul Asylum.
I agree.
I could deal with this.
On the other side of them was
when it went too far, like Soul Asylum gone out of control was Collective Soul.
And Goo Goo Dolls.
Goo Goo Dolls was exactly what I was going to say. The Goo Goo Dolls are on the other side of that, and I hate the Goo Goo Dolls.
I hate both those bands.
There's a guy I used to work with. His favorite band, let me see, he's 6 years younger than me. His favorite band is the Goo Goo Dolls.
Why?
I don't get it. I
would have rather understood. I would rather you said that his favorite band was Matchbox 20. I could at least understand that as a young know-nothing.
What if I came in with his favorite band is the Boo Radleys?
I would have been like,
yeah, Boo Radleys.
Hell yeah. There she goes again.
But no, I mean, like, I get it. The
Boo Radleys didn't suck. They were.
I don't like that version of the song. I really didn't.
That's fine, but the Boo Radleys were a pretty popular UK band. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that I think that probably my appreciation of the soundtrack comes from my overall appreciation of the movie. Again, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, why do I, it's like, I like all of the Bond themes. Some of them are songs I wouldn't like if they weren't a Bond theme, but they're associated with something that I love. And so, we talk about that again at the end of the month with Madonna. But I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not going to apologize for my love of this soundtrack. I don't give a shit. You guys can suck it.
You never should. Should.
You cannot account for taste, and this is kind of one of those movies that is, and I think that, like, like we had said, this is one of those movies that fits a very, very specific, a very specific range of age groups. If you're too young, it's not quite. It probably won't hit for you. If you're older, it's not going to hit for you. But if you were 15 to 25 when this movie came out, you probably really liked this movie.
Well, Joe, you're a good barometer of this because you said you never fully saw it back in the day. What did you think of it overall? Watching it now, did you like it?
I would say I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I could see that there were moments. I could see where you would like it. If I saw it younger, I probably would have liked it a lot more. But being older, I'm kind of seeing like, okay, this didn't make any sense. What's like the weird two movies going on thing that we talked about earlier? Didn't know how to take itself. Is it going to be more slapstick, kind of quirky? Is it going to play it straight? That was really jarring to me.
Right.
Just how everything came together. There are definite moments where I'm like, okay, that's really funny. Like, we just need more of that kind of thing throughout. Not bad, but just not a great movie.
Yeah. Just to kind of go back to some of that casting. So initially, Mike Myers was asked to play Charlie because of Wayne's World. He liked the script, and because he could relate to the whole fear of commitment, because he said a lot of his friends had that too. But before that, it went through Woody Allen, which would have made the character a Jewish person instead of a Scottish family person. But then people like Albert Brooks, Martin Short, but if possibly the most obvious of everybody, Chevy Chase was offered the movie at one point. And Chevy Chase is 1,000,000% one of those, I'm from Saturday Night Live, I'm just going to do shit to the camera and you're going to film it and shut up. And that's because I would say if anybody was at all like Chevy Chase in their film career, it would be Mike Myers more than anybody, probably. Chevy Chase never seemed to really Chevy Chase made some good movies. He also made some really, really, really bad movies because he was Chevy Chase. But that doesn't surprise me at all. At one point in time, Sharon Stone was signed on to play Harriet.
Huh.
I
wouldn't have noticed that at all.
Well, here's the thing. At one point in time, it was Mike Myers and Sharon Stone. And because Mike Myers was going to play his dad, she wanted to play both Harriet and Rose.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, I don't think that
would not have worked.
I do not think so. No. So and I have a feeling also all of a sudden this movie got to be very, very expensive, and it probably was not something that Columbia TriStar was interested in doing.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on this?
None from me.
No, it's fun. This is one that if it's on TV and I'm flipping channels and looking for something to do and it's on, I'll probably watch it.
I would stop every time. Absolutely. This is the ultimate little things movie. This movie has all the little things, and those little things are the things I like.
Fair.
Feels like we go out on that.
Yeah, probably. I like little things. So Chuck, you're up next. What's next on this Guilty Pleasures month?
Next, we're gonna head on down the road to a little roadhouse on the side of a country road with Dalton as he tries to clean up the Double Deuce. Patrick Swayze in 1989's Roadhouse. That's what's next. That's what you asked me, right?
Yes.
This is the crown jewel of the month, in my opinion.
For me, it definitely is.
It's one of those movies that is inexplicably perfect. It shouldn't be, and yet it is.
I'm really looking forward to talking about this.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. So, Wednesdays. That's when this show happens. That's the film Seizure show. As Chuck said, next week is the Roadhouse, so be there. You can go over to Facebook and Twitter. You can follow us there. That way, you know when these episodes happen. You can find out. You can be right there. Also, you can also find out when my show on Mondays, Monster Mondays, happens. This week, I am talking about The Uncanny. It's a revenge flick with cats, and that's awesome. It's awesome. So do those follow things. You can also find the show and both shows, Film Seizure and Monster Mondays, on various places like SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Audible. We even upload the stuffs to YouTube. So, subscribe to us in all of those places. Just be inundated. Have your inbox just flood with Film Seizure goodness. Creamy Film Seizure goodness.
Yeah.
This Friday, I continue my Lena Romay month at bmovieenema.com with Sinfonia Erotica. That is another Marquis de Sade movie.
yes, it is.
Does that translate to Boner Symphony?
Yes, Boner Symphony.
Okay. Sign me up, bud.
Yep, right. Or you go over to bmovieenema.com, read about it, read all about it and stuff. So next week, be here for Roadhouse. Joe, I hear you will be riding with us and probably picking up a couple of brewskis at the old Double Deuce.
We better.
Yeah, I
plan on throwing a stop sign through Joe's car window. So
I plan on making all three
Thank
of I plan on making all three of you my regular Saturday night thing. So
I plan on ripping all of your throats out.
oh no!
I thought all three of you would have been bigger, but
find out what all this means next week.
Yes,
during the
indeed.
Roadhouse episode.
All right. So until then, Joe, we will see you next week. My name is Geoff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
Oh yeah, I'm Jason Oliver.
Heed,
I was waiting for Joe.
finish now.
You've been listening to Film Seizure. You stole my heart and my cat.